Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
All right, what's up, you guys? Wild Healthers. This is Dr. Erin Faules, formerly known as Dr. Erin Donaldson. I'm probably not going to say that after the next few podcasts because hopefully people know by now. Same person though, just new name. I am interviewing the lovely Ariana Fiorita. Am I saying your last name right? I've never said your last name before. Fiorita. I've known you for years and I've literally never said your last name. I'm so
You
sorry.
haven't had to.
So Ari, as she is lovingly called at Wild Health here, is wonderful. She's a colleague of mine. She's a licensed and registered dietitian and nutritionist, and she is national board certified health and wellness coach. She specializes in integrative and functional nutrition, as well as fitness and sports nutrition. She's passionate about empowering individuals of all ages and backgrounds to achieve balanced, sustainable lifestyle through personalized health strategies. Ari's professional experience includes working at the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine before joining Wild Health as a health coach. She is also a nutrition coach with LVLTN Coaching. She teaches a healthy lifestyles and preventative medicine course at Case Western Reserve University, and she coaches CrossFit. Outside of her professional roles, she enjoys spending time with her family, friends, and 3 dogs, as well as staying active with CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting. I did not know you had 3 dogs. I also have 3 dogs, and people think I'm crazy. So
Same.
that's awesome. That's a fun fact to learn about you again today on the podcast, of course.
Love it. Yeah, they're usually like in and out of my office during patient calls, and so it's always a good talking point.
That's awesome. Back when in our last house we had 3 dogs and 8 chickens in the middle of the city, and people are like, "What are you doing?" Like when we got pregnant, everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are insane." This
Hey,
is
I'm sure
way
the
too
eggs were like
much going
cheaper
on.
though.
Oh, for sure, and they're so good. They're so
Yeah.
good when it's like your own chickens and they're eating like the right things and they're happy and all that stuff.
Oh, I
So
love
I don't know.
that.
Maybe they just tasted better because maybe it was placebo. I don't know. Okay, awesome. Well, so today you guys are gonna get to know Ari, and she's kind of just an invaluable resource for us here at Wild Health, both as one of our amazing health coaches, but also, just because our kind of go-to in-house expert on all things nutrition. What we really want to touch you guys about today is kind of how precision medicine or really personalized data-driven medicine affects nutrition plans. So like you can look up online of like what is a healthy diet and you're going to get a million different answers. People say I felt my best when I went vegan, I felt my best when I went carnivore, I felt my best when I went paleo, like, and generally what these things have in common is like they eliminated junk and they increased whole real foods and they felt better. But how do we like take it a step further and look at like for your biology, for your genetics, like for what you have specifically going on in your body? How do we personalize that nutrition? What does that look like? What kind of data points are we looking at? What kind of wearables might we have you use to help us get that? What are some maybe anecdotal stories of how this has worked for people historically, and just kind of go through all of this of what does this look like? Because for every single person, it's different, and it's just one of those things that like it's gonna come up for every single patient because everybody is eating every day, and we, wanting to really optimize those things to the best that they can because it's one of the biggest levers that we can kind of pull on to optimize how someone's both feeling in the short term, but as well as their health in the long term. So that's what we're going to dive into today, kind of a little bit of a brief overview, and just kind of talking about some common questions that come up, but it's going to be pretty free flow. So excited to dive into it with you. Ari, is there anything off the cuff that you feel like is kind of like the coolest thing that we're doing these days in terms of using precision medicine and data to help drive nutrition? Like, what comes to mind just being an expert in this?
I think everything that we're doing is super cool. But I think that the biggest thing is like the ability to have a health coach as part of your journey. Because I think when we think about genetic testing or just any sort of like advanced testing, it can be really overwhelming for people to get those results and be like, what do I do with that? So I think that what we're doing at Wild Health is really special because we have all of this really advanced data, but you also have access to a provider as well as a health coach that helps you walk through that journey and like get to know you really well. Like we're talking about individuals' lifestyles and what they like to eat, how they like to socialize, and we're integrating all of these recommendations into that so that it is personalized, but it's also really sustainable for somebody, and it's not just like, "Where do I even start?" They might type into Google and find a million different ways, to interpret these results.
Got it. Okay, so this is such a good segue, and I didn't really expect to talk about this, so sorry for putting you on the spot. But I feel like, a lot of programs will give you a lot of data and a lot of outcomes of this data and say, okay, now go do it, and you'll be healthy. And how, like, I do think health coaches make us different. Not only that, but I think I'm biased that our health coaches are awesome with like extremely valuable experience. And they're incredibly intelligent. And what does that look like for a patient? So, like, say you become a Wild Health patient, like, what does this journey look like? You get your blood work done, you get your genetics drawn, sent off. You come in and you get a super involved health report that's like a book, like an ebook on your health, basically, of like, what's the right nutrition, what's the right exercise, what are the right supplements, and you go through all of this with your doctor and one of the Wild Health doctors. So we'll go through all of this data and give recommendations, and then as a health coach, like what do you do from there? Like what makes us different in terms of like how is this so valuable for the patients in terms of like take it from nutrition since that's what we're talking about. Like what are some common things you help patients with in terms of troubleshooting of like how to implement those recommendations?
Sure. Yeah, as part of our call initially when we meet the patient, we're usually talking about their diet and their exercise patterns. And so once we have that information and then we get those results, that whole first section of our health report is really tailored towards an individual's nutrition. And so a lot of times we'll look at, well, what's an ideal macronutrient breakdown? And not that we're asking everybody to track their macros every day, but it can give us an idea of how can we structure our plate in a way that's gonna work really well for you, both energy-wise, metabolically, and, just for overall health and wellness. So we'll usually take them through that section and say, "Hey, you metabolize or you utilize, carbohydrates really well," assuming they're complex carbohydrates. Your fat, maybe we recommend about 30% fat, maybe 40% from carbohydrates. This is how you can construct your plate with the foods that you like to fit that. The other part of it that I really, really love is that we also look at micronutrients. So we're not talking about like restriction necessarily. We're talking about like inclusion of foods. And
Yeah.
so you have a high need for antioxidants. Like let's find some foods that you really love that we can incorporate with every meal that really support your overall health. And so there's different genetics that kind of point towards like how important is antioxidants, how important is, getting adequate vitamin or omega 3s. Arguably, that's important for everyone, but specific genetic
Yeah.
variants can also show us like, hey, here's like some increased motivation. Here's why it's important for you, not just blanket statements of like, eat more vegetables every day.
Totally, and also you help them with the how, right? Like, because that's gonna look really different for a mom of 3, that's running around all day every day versus maybe someone that's traveling nonstop for business and eating out, but wanting to eat as healthy as possible versus, like, say we have someone that really needs more omega-3s and they hate fish, as an example. So, like, these are just, like, common scenarios I'm thinking of in my head that come up a lot in terms of our patients and, like, having that personalized touch of like, we can give you recommendations till we're blue in the face, but if it doesn't work with your life, like it's probably not gonna be like Ari said, sustainable for you. So we've got to meet you there and kind of figure out, okay, how do we blend like what's medically best for you in a way and your longevity in a way that actually works for your life, because that's when it's going to stick and create habits. Because like as humans, we're not geared towards making like habit changes that are going to benefit us in the long term if we have to sacrifice short term like energy, happiness, efficiency, anything. So we're really like short term minded when we create habits. So I think the health coaches are just invaluable with this in terms of implementing these things. And we can kind of talk about specific scenarios as we go forward. But I just wanted to give a little bit of like a backdrop into what you guys do that's so valuable. Okay, so let's talk about something we talked about before we started recording, which is like a cool thing that we're doing for so many patients right now, which is CGMs or continuous glucose monitors. So say we get someone's blood work back and they have either elevated insulin levels indicating insulin resistance, um, may or may not be symptomatic. Maybe they're holding on to like stubborn belly fat or having like energy issues or something like that. But maybe they're not symptomatic at all. They had no idea, but it does increase their risk of most diseases. Or maybe they have normal insulin levels, but elevated blood sugar on labs, right? Or maybe a combination of the two. And so if we look at all these, sometimes it's really, really helpful to determine what in the diet or lifestyle can be raising blood sugar. So tell me a little bit more about if we have a patient using a continuous glucose monitor, what does that look like for them? Like what is it in a nutshell? Like, how do you counsel patients through that? And like also, what are you doing with them to look at, like, are you looking at the results with them? Like, are you guys running experiments? Just like walk me through what that looks like.
Yeah. So usually we'll have them get their CGM either from a pharmacy or over the last couple of months, there's actually been a couple of really great options over the counter that people can get themselves. And what they'll do is they'll just stick it on
Like
the
the
back of.
direct to consumer companies you were mentioning.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
aren't there some that are like sub $100 a month now?
Yeah, I think there are. They generally what I'm seeing run like average around 100 to $150 a month,
Mhm.
which is about the same as what you would get from like a pharmacy. But I think they're going to
Mhm.
be continuing to get more and more affordable.
Yeah, as more people are doing them, that makes sense. How long are most of your patients? I'm so sorry to interrupt. I like asked you a
Yeah,
question
you're
and then
good.
I get excited about this. How many months are most of your patients doing these?
Yeah, most of my patients will wear it for about a month or 2, but I do have patients that they're seeing really good results and they're finding the data super empowering that they'll wear it for longer than that. So it's a average time probably a month, but we do have patients that will wear them for, 6 months or so, or they'll even just go on or off. So they might wear it for
Nice.
a month or so, then take a break for vacations or life, and then put it back
Yeah.
on again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's funny. I usually recommend they start it like maybe not right when they're going on a vacation. Like they started at like a normal time of their life where they're just like getting a baseline. But okay, no more interrupting you. So your patient gets their CGM, it arrives at home. Like, what do you guys do from there?
Yep. So then we just talk about the proper placement. So most people put it, right in the back of their arm. It's really easy to apply. It's, even for people that are afraid of needles, like it just a little dink and it's on. And then what we'll do is we'll link them up to at least through Libre. We can actually virtually monitor their data. And so once they have it on, we can sync up. We can share during a coaching call and say, hey, this is what we're seeing. And it's really neat because a lot of people will see spikes and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible." But we're like, "No, like let's talk about what those spikes actually mean for you and, is it diet? Is it because you exercised and you were doing a really high intensity workout and we saw that spike because of that glucose mobilization?" I actually had a patient that was eating super super well. He continued to see some elevation in just like fasting blood sugar. His insulin was a bit high. And he really navigated that, through diet first, and it was still just kind of remaining high despite what we were doing from a nutrition standpoint. And we actually correlated his stress levels were what were majorly causing some of the, just the spikes during the day. He had a very stressful job, running around, new baby. So I think that there's a lot of really cool things that we can learn about ourselves with wearing something like a CGM. But I think most importantly, like just being able to like talk about it with a health coach or with a provider and see what they're actually seeing real time, you just get a better understanding of your body and how your body processes things like carbs or responds to stressors. So then when you're not wearing it, you still have those tools and you still have that knowledge of, what's kind of going on internally.
Yeah, totally. It's funny you say that about the structures. I just saw someone post the other day. This like hit home for me because I have an almost 6 month old. I saw someone post the other day. They're like, "Tell me that your baby crying doesn't impact a mom's biology," and it was their CGM. And every time the baby cried, the glucose went like to 200. Like it was so stress inducing for the mom. And so it's kind of interesting. And so why stress increases blood sugar? I mean, one of the main reasons is the elevation in the hormone cortisol, which is kind of known as the stress hormone, is going to free up blood sugar. And, our body does this to protect us because anytime it's under stress, it wants to liberate energy so we can use it to do what we need to do to support our bodies and our survival. With chronic stress, that's obviously problematic and not necessarily needed. But we can still see those same like biologic implications. What's interesting to me about stress is that yes, when we just say stress less, like that's going to be really tough to do. I mean, you work with patients on that and you're going to help them with those coping skills. Sure, but it's not as quick of a thing. But what you guys got to know is that like it's not always emotional stressors. It's even physiologic stressors are going to have that same impact on your biology. So like that same person who was doing that hit training that was causing the blood sugar spikes, maybe if they had some fuel or a snack before their workout, that blood sugar spike would be curbed. Those are the kind of experiments you can run. Specifically women, I see that in a lot. I see women that are like, if they're coming in with an A1C or an average blood sugar over 3 months of like pre-diabetic range, maybe 5.8, 5.9, but their fasting insulin's like 1, like it's really low. It's like, well, my guess is this is kind of stress induced and maybe they're super low carb and maybe they're doing intermittent fasting and maybe they're doing fasted exercise in the morning because that's the only time they can work out before their kids are up. Like, this is kind of a classic story. And if we just get them some fuel in the morning, oftentimes you see that blood sugar come down. Even sometimes paradoxically, increasing carbs can help that come down too, depending on how active they are, what their genetics look like, et cetera. So it's just so interesting. Everybody's so different, and blood sugar and insulin have such a powerful impact on not only how we feel every day, because it's quite literally our energy, right? So if you're not having stable energy throughout the day, like this has a massive impact on that, as well as so many other things. When insulin levels are high, so if it's going to increase or it's going to make it like almost impossible to burn body fat, as an example. So body
Hmm.
composition goals can suffer. It's potently inflammatory. So, that's going to lead to other symptoms and other disease risk. It's inherently a risk factor for most chronic diseases anyway. So, in terms of longevity, so it's just a really important area to target. And we have the ability now with technology that's very simple technology and pretty cheap technology, all things considered, to get like personalized immediate biofeedback that's just your own body, right? Like we're not looking at with personalized precision medicine, we're getting away from that whole population medicine model where we're saying, oh, the average person does well with this. No, we're looking at your specific biology and saying your body needs this. So this is just like a prime example of how to do that. We do these all the time for patients. The health coaches are just extremely helpful in helping navigate that because a lot of people come to us and they're like, "Yeah, I've done a CGM before. I didn't really know what to do with it." Like I got my data when I ate French fries, it bumped. Like, they don't really know always what to do. Some do, but like a lot of them aren't sure what to do with that data. Okay, cool. So that's an awesome one. Let's talk about genetics and nutrition. Just like briefly, this could be like a whole, I mean, we could talk about this for 3 hours, but like, you know, what do you see like really move the needle in terms of how you approach things with patients? Like, what are some common areas? I can think of like what I see when I go through the health report, but like, what are some common areas of where this really impacts actual actions you take with people or changes they might make with their life when you look at their genetic profile?
Sure. Yeah, and I think Probably the biggest one, at least the one I've been talking about most recently, is a lot of our genetics around lipid metabolism, specifically around saturated fat. So I think that, like, back to your point about the CGM real quick, I think we have a lot of women, especially that we work with, that they tend to do like they see an elevated hemoglobin A1C or they see an elevated blood glucose without wearing a CGM. They might automatically start to lower their carbohydrates. Maybe they go on some fasting protocols. Maybe they go on like a
Hmm.
very low carb diet, thinking that that's helpful based on what they know about glucose.
Yeah, I mean,
And
which if they weren't checking their CGM or they weren't checking an insulin level or they weren't checking their genetics for a lot, that would be helpful, right? If they were
totally.
your classic like insulin resistant patient driving an elevated average blood sugar, those are the right things to do. But like for a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of nuance there. For a lot of our patients,
Yeah.
that's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think that, like, then when we add the genetics that layer onto that, we can actually look at, like, very specific, like I mentioned, the saturated fat. So we might find that, "Oh, I went low carb, but now I'm eating, like, coconut oil, and I'm eating a ton of, like, meats that are higher in saturated fats," maybe even, like, more, like, processed, like, protein bars and things like that, and then we start to see that things like their lipids are moving in out in the wrong direction, and they're becoming more insulin resistant and they're not losing weight. So I think that this is a way that we can really personalize it by being like, hey, look, like this is what your genetics look like. It looks like saturated fat could potentially be problematic. Let's try to limit that to, under 30 grams per day or under 20 grams per day and see if we can move the needle. And we kind of bring the lab work into that. We get pretty comprehensive lipid panels and we can use that with like some of those FTO SNPs that we look at in the health section or the nutrition section of the health report. And with that data together, your genetics are kind of your blueprint, but your labs are kind of like the report card of how you're doing real time. And so as we make these changes, we make some of, we figure out, okay, what are the top sources of saturated fat in your diet? Let's talk about that. Let's
Mhm.
make some swaps. Let's maybe add some more fiber. And then let's recheck in 3 to 4 months. And that can be really, we can see some pretty dramatic reduction in their like total cholesterol or their LDL cholesterol. And so that's been something that I've been working on patients with a lot that seems to be pretty easy for people. They're like, I don't really miss, some of the foods. And it's not even about cutting out foods that are high in saturated fats. It's about having the knowledge of like, okay, if I want to have, a burger or a steak for dinner, then I'm going to moderate my saturated fats the rest of the day. And I can still kind of keep it at a moderate level. So I think that's just one example, Erin. And I don't know if we want to go through some other examples, but that's something that I think has been most impactful.
Yeah, no,
Or
I
more
think
impactful.
that's so powerful because the evidence is like been very controversial through the years, right? Does cholesterol matter? Does what fat we eat affect our cholesterol in our bloodstream and all these things? And there's like all these different camps on statins versus not statins. And it's been a hot topic for a long time in medicine from a lot of different angles, right? And is saturated fat good or bad for you? And like the answer is yes, right? Like depends on you. And this is why, in my opinion, there's so much like ambiguity here and controversy, I think is more appropriate is because like, yes, when we look at the overall meta-analyses of the data, does cholesterol in the diet affect cholesterol in the blood? Probably not. But that doesn't mean for you that doesn't happen. Like when we
Correct.
look at the personalized nutrition, there's a subset of people that can have a drastic response to their lipid profile in response to reducing saturated fat in the diet. We can typically pretty confidently predict if that's going to be you or not based on looking at your genetics. But what's great about that is not only does that reduce your risk of long term cardiovascular disease, which maybe if you're coming to us and you're 30 and you feel great, that's not on your mind, but it's the number one killer in men and women everywhere. So it matters long term, right? So we're always thinking about it in the background. Even if you're 30, that's when we want to prevent it, right? From starting. And so, you may be somebody that diet really impacts that. You may be someone that diet really doesn't impact that. And we can have that conversation too of, okay, then what does that look like for you? Are there other risk factors here? Do we need to be aggressive with your cholesterol management or not? Um, you may be somebody that has elevated cholesterol because your thyroid's dysfunctional. And then we talk about how
Mhm.
to support your thyroid with nutrition and other things. So there's so many different, like, there's so much nuance here that it really comes down to like, why don't we not look at this from a population level, but why don't we look at it from a personalized like you level of what your labs and genetics, et cetera, show, and then we can also like make those appropriate changes and then run tests, like you said. Did it work? Because don't take our word for it. Like let's look at the data and see if it worked, and if it didn't, then we pivot. Um,
Yeah, I think the
awesome.
other thing. Oh, sorry, Erin. I was
No,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
like, speaking from personal experience, like, I'd always been somebody that was, pretty healthy, and then I ran my genetics when I first started with Wild Health, and I was one of those people that my lipids were elevated, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm a dietitian, I should know what to eat and know what to do," and I was one of those people that was pretty sensitive to saturated fat intake,
Mhm.
and as I started to shift to that and actually not be so afraid of incorporating more complex carbs, energy level went through the roof, lipid panel looks so much better.
You're probably
Um
putting on muscle more easily if you
yeah,
increase your carbs.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally, which was super cool to see. And I guess the second one that I think is pretty big for people, especially like the patients that you work with often in terms of autoimmune disease, is our gluten
Yeah.
intolerance. And I think that people are just so on the fence with, should I eat gluten? Should I not eat gluten? I hear it's bad, but we can actually, run some kind of a short-term elimination based on, does somebody have 2 SNPs for some of the variants that potentially makes them more gluten intolerant. And I've had so many people be like, "I'm really glad that you kind of pushed me to do that. My life is so different. I feel so different." And it's amazing how just like those little, arguably
Mhm.
small changes can make such a big difference, and we help them
Totally.
do that.
I mean, about 30% of my patients with celiac disease have 0 GI symptoms. So it's really like
Mhm.
they might just have neurologic symptoms. They might have brain fog, low energy, like concentration issues, sleep issues, headaches, things like that. They might just have low micronutrients. So it might be a clue that they're not absorbing well. But I
Mhm.
agree with you. We can run those genetics and with quite a bit of certainty say, yeah, you're very low risk for celiac. You may be gluten sensitive and you may feel a lot better. We may get your inflammation down when you go gluten free, but having it every once in a while is probably not a big deal. If you're running positive on both those SNPs, the odds of you having an issue with gluten are very, very high. Like I have celiac disease and I'm positive on both of them. And I remember our genetic specialist a while back was like, "Did you know you're positive on these? And you're at risk for celiac." And I'm like, "I haven't eaten gluten since I was like 13." So because I got diagnosed like the good old fashioned way on colonoscopy when I was young, but
Yeah.
it's super interesting how like you don't have to have those invasive procedures now to get this data, right? So that's a really great one. And also in terms of like what diet to adhere to, I mean, you kind of talked about the different macronutrients that certain genetic profiles might favor, but we can get a lot more detail, like Ari was saying, with micronutrients as well. Like there's some people, and I tend to see this in patterns with people, and it's kind of predictable now after looking at a bunch of these, like should someone be plant-based or not? Like, there's some like, that you can get a lot of clues to that in someone's genetic report. Like, they might not process plant-based omega-3 fatty acids and convert them well to the type of fatty acid that's gonna support our brain, period. So those people are like if they're strictly vegan, we have a conversation with them of like, "Are you open to a fish oil supplement?" Like, this is the conversation to have around this and how do we work around this? Some people have really dysfunctional methylation genetics, super common, and those people, oftentimes, if there's a plant-based diet going into that, there can be, a lack of, B12 or phosphatidylcholine, which can exacerbate that, which can definitely be supported with supplements. So there's workarounds for these things, but it just helps to have the data, right? To help determine, okay, if this is the diet you have, like how do we support you in that? Or some people are like, I don't know, I just did this because I thought it was healthy. Is it what's healthy for me? So we can really get super granular in like what are the superpower foods to add in for you? What are the main macronutrients that your body will thrive with? How much of those do you need? And again, like Ari said, like we don't have very many people that I think are really strictly tracking macros every day. um, Probably have a decent amount of people that are kinda dirty tracking and, like, looking at their
Mhm.
protein roughly, but that's great. So these are kind of the common things. Um, what else? Like, do any stories come to mind of big changes? We've kind of, like, talked about them throughout. Like, any other big things that you feel like people ask about or, like, really hot topics that your patients are coming to you with?
Yeah, one quick story as it pertains back to celiac. Like I had a woman who was like middle age and she was having so many nutrient deficiencies. Like I could even tell through the computer like that she was having issues with like malnutrition even though she was eating, really well. And we had seen this even on, some of her genetic SNPs that we were looking at of just like she not only had some of the SNPs that she probably wasn't, adequately making, or getting, from her diet, like adequate vitamin A and adequate omega-3s and things like that. But over time, we actually encouraged her to get a colonoscopy, and she was actually diagnosed with celiac disease like in her 40s. And as soon as she figured that out, she's like, no other doctors have ever even brought that up. But through like some of this investigation from looking at some of those like celiac haplotypes and things like that through genetic
She was high
testing.
risk through her genetics, but you were also seeing a lot of like poor absorption of micronutrients, you're saying?
Totally.
And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
you just, yeah, did you guys encourage the colonoscopy? Probably not just for celiac testing, I'm guessing, just to make sure there was nothing else going on more concerning given her age
Yes.
that, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah. We're like, "We should probably check for this." So I think that was really transformational for her, and I think, like,
Yeah.
other things just as I'm kind of thinking about, conversations I'm having with patients, especially when it comes to, like, detoxification and, like, hormone metabolism, I think for whatever reason, I just tend to see less and less people getting adequate antioxidant, adequate, just even vegetable intake in their diet. Like we'll do a food recall for a week or so, and it's amazing. Like even people who are like, "Yeah, I eat a lot of fruits and veggies," like it's very low. And I
Mhm.
think that a lot of our kind of micronutrients that we're looking at in the health report that point towards things like sulforaphane or point towards things like just adding some turmeric to your diet, like things that are pretty like simple changes, but that really help with liver detoxification, can really help with supporting estrogen metabolism and things like that, like our cruciferous vegetables as an example. And so I think that that's a cool conversation to have with people too, because they don't realize the power of nutrition and how it supports their health. And I think people know that nutrition matters, but I think until they actually see it on paper of like, this matters to me, I don't think they're as
Mhm.
bought in. Like they're like, okay, I'll just like have a salad every day for lunch, or I'll just throw some kind of micronutrients here and
Well,
there.
but even if they buy in, like, then what do they do with it? Like, that to
Yeah.
me is, like, the roadblock for so many people. Because even me personally, I'm like, I know I need to be getting 25 to 35 grams of fiber every day. Like, I know my genetics and, like, what's good for me. That requires intentionality. Adding sulforaphane and turmeric to your diet requires intentionality for people that are busy, that are firing on all cylinders. And, like, what does that look like in terms of an actual plate each day? And, like, grocery shopping and meal prepping and, you know, what does that look like in action, right? Like, how do you actually accomplish it? That to me is like the big leap that you have to make. And then once it becomes a habit, that's different, like I kind of know now what are the high fiber foods that I enjoy that I can add in throughout the day. Like it's become a lot simpler over time. And I know all the science, I buy in, and it's still hard. So less hard now, but those things just take a lot of intentionality. So I think when you're working with a health coach that can say like, okay, yeah, well, if you add raspberries or blackberries to your yogurt in the morning, then you're going to get 9 grams of fiber or like whatever it looks like. And like you can actually help them with like the nuts and bolts of it because otherwise, like, yes, you might read that it's good for you. And then if you read specifically based on your biology, then you'll trust it versus just like reading an article online of like, this is healthy. You'll trust it, but I don't always think that correlates to action, especially sustained action. So,
Hmm.
you have a long-term relationship with these people. This is not one visit. Like, this is a marathon with these people, and you develop rapport and trust and a long-term relationship and, like, this zero judgment environment where you're able to, like, meet them where they are, and I think it's super, super powerful to take all of the data we give them and help them, like, employ that in their lives. So, because people who are interested in getting this kind of data tend to be successful, they tend to be driven, they tend to be busy, and, they're able to do these things, but having like the brain power and like stick with itness to make those changes when they're doing so many other things in their life can be tough. So I think it's just like an invaluable resource to have you guys to help with that part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of our coaching calls really look at, like you said, everyone's busy, right? And people are just looking for like the easiest way to do it. They don't want to spend hours trying to figure this all out. And so I think, what I'll often do on coaching calls is like even talk about where they grocery shop and like actually doing some of the legwork and be like, okay, well, let's walk through your next grocery shopping trip together and let's construct some meals with things that, your family will like and actually come up with a game plan for the next week. Like we can sit down and actually write out that plan during a coaching call. And we can reference that, using like pulling up their labs, pulling up their genetic report. Like, hey, like let's add some berries to your breakfast. Let's add just some extra like herbs, maybe even some broccoli sprouts to that lunch meal that you're having, along with that, good 4 ounces of protein or whatever we're looking at.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool to like have that, not like hand holding really, but just like, hey, we're here to support you. Let's like walk through your day from like start to finish and like figure out a way to add these things all in that's
Yeah.
sustainable.
Yeah. Like, I remember learning about how helpful sardines were for me from Wild Health like many moons ago, now many years ago. And I had all this shame because I like had sardines in my pantry for like 2 years and obviously got new ones,
Same.
but I'm, like, just staring at them, and they're, like, staring at me back, like, "Why aren't you eating me?" And I'm like, "'Cause you look disgusting." You know? Like, I just really struggled with it, and I'm like, "I know these are so good for me, but what do I do?" And, like, I finally figured out if you, like, hash them up and put them with some salmon and make it like a tuna salad and make it really yummy, it's delicious, it's a cheap way to meal prep fish, like, breaks up the monotony of just, like, a fish fillet, that you're cooking for dinner. It's simple. It's like so many boxes are checked. You can put it with like, fermented foods on it, or you can put it on greens. Like you can do so many things with it. And like, so my husband and I literally meal prep that like most weeks and have for years basically at this point, just to keep it as like a quick grab and go meal, especially when I was postpartum or pregnant. Like it was so helpful to have. And I think that's one of the like fan favorite recommendations to this day that I make with patients because I'm like, "Do you like fish?" And they're like, and I'm like, "Do you like tuna salad?" And they're like, "Yeah, I do," you know? And so I'm like, "Okay, what about this spin on tuna salad?" And most people tend to like it, and it gives you, like, all these macro and micronutrients. And so just, like, tricks like that, like, I have, like, one trick up my sleeve for nutrition. Ari and the other health coaches have a bazillion, so don't don't ask me. But, that's just, like, an example of how, you can personalize this in a way that's, like, you can just put it on autopilot, right? And then it can be, like, checking a bunch of boxes in one, and you're getting your protein, you're getting your omega-3s, like, it's just kind of running itself at that point. So, I don't know if that's helpful for anyone who's staring at their sardines.
And I think that's what's so cool is, like, everybody at Wild Health, like, shares these tips and tricks, and we all practice what we preach, and so I think that, all of us, when we first started with Wild Health, chances are we all went through the health report. We all kind of learned about ourselves, kind of alongside what patients are doing, so having the ability to then share our journey with patients, I think makes it really relatable, and we've all kind of been through it. So I love the sardine recipe. I do something very similar, Erin. Dr. Stone had me add like some hot sauce and a little bit of like
Mm.
vegan ranch to it. I gotta say
Yeah,
that's
nice.
like the
Nice.
best.
Yeah, sriracha can be good in it too, depending on,
Yeah,
like, what flavor you're going with. Sweet.
yeah.
Well, this was fun. Is there anything else you can think of that we missed?
Probably, but I think
Right? We'll come back for the next one.
yeah, no, I think that
Yeah.
was good.
I love it. I think what could be fun, maybe at some point we'll drop, like, a Q&A on Instagram or something, and we'll do, audience questions. I think that could be a fun nutrition segment to plan maybe for the future. So maybe we'll drop that soon, and get going on that for going
That would
forward
be
because
really fun.
I'm guessing people are gonna have, like, specific questions about this topic because this is, like, the most popular thing we talk about in the health report for most people. So, cool. Well, awesome. This was fun, and we will talk to you guys soon.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.